and welcome to the Briefing Room. I'm Bill Froehlich from WTCM Radio News. It's our weekly roundup of some of the stories that are making headlines right here in northern Michigan. And joining me at the table this week, Marisa McKay from 9 and 10 News. Thanks for coming back.
Thank you.
And Peter Payette from Interlochen Public Radio. Hey, Peter. Hi, Bill. Good to see you. We've got spring is finally here. The weather isn't necessarily agreeing, but summer right around the corner. And one of the first things we're going to talk about this week is the cherry growers and the crop out in the field that is hopefully inevitable.
Should be a good crop, huh?
It should be. You've got a story this week with IPR. There's a vote amongst the cherry growers.
Right. So I think it's every 6 years, they decide if they want to have these market controls, which is the ability of the industry to look at the crop every year and say, okay, it's usually too big, right? So it allows the industry to say, okay, the crop is this big, there's this much demand, so you can only sell this percentage of your cherry crop. You might recall back in 2009, this led to a significant amount of cherries being left on the ground, and particularly one grower up on Old Mission Peninsula put a sign on his pile of rotting cherries that said Traverse City, cherry capital of the USA, or something to that effect. And that picture, a picture taken by the Associated Press, went far and wide. It was in the Wall Street Journal, big article in the Wall Street Journal about frustration with the system. So that's been growing, and I think this year the industry leaders who all say this is absolutely essential, that we have this ability to, otherwise the price can just collapse. And those leaders were pretty nervous that that there was a level of dissatisfaction that might lead to growers voting the whole thing out. Yeah. The voting ended Friday, and I was at the conference in January, and they had a whole session on this, and they had a panel of all these leaders in the industry just imploring their peers to not take the risk and throw this out. So the votes are there now. I assume we'll know soon what the result is.
Do you know, was this a yes/no ballot question, or what was the actual question posed?
I believe it's just a yes/no. I didn't see a ballot.
To get rid of them.
They can keep it or get rid of it. And it also, what goes with it is the program to market cherries. I believe growers, well, I don't want to quote the number, but a few pennies for every pound of cherries sold now goes into this marketing program. The cherry, not just another berry, kind of superfruit marketing that they're doing. Okay. And that's been very successful, I think, by everyone's assessment. So, but that's a part of this. It's all one package. So if people are dissatisfied with this one aspect of it that allows for the restriction of the supply, then they would also be throwing out the marketing program that promotes cherries as the health benefits of cherries.
Sounds like a sneaky way to do that.
A sneaky way by linking them together?
By linking them together on the ballot.
Right. Well, I think that was historically the complaint with the marketing order is that the growers would point at the leaders and say, all you're about is destroying cherries. All this does is restrict our supply and force us to put cherries in freezers or leave them on the floor of the orchard. And so the marketing program is the response to that. No, this is about building markets for cherries. We're going to sell more cherries. So they do sort of go hand in hand, because the more cherries you can sell, the less restrictive you have to be when you have a big crop.
Interesting. And do we know when the results are supposed to be
I don't.
coming out?
And I can tell you, I think the sense I have from talking to growers is that it probably will pass. But they were pretty nervous. You could tell. The panel had an air of contrition to it. There was a sort of a sense of, we've not handled this as well as we could. Maybe we've been too restrictive. We've made some changes. There was one year that the formula that it's very complicated. They plug all these numbers in, and then it comes out with a total and says, okay, this amount can be sold on the free market, this amount is restricted. it was going to be a small restriction, and I think they decided to have no restriction. So the board and the leaders in the industry have used their discretion to be a little more relaxed on the restrictions in response to people saying this is too much. We don't grow cherries to leave them on the ground.
Yeah. Marisa, I won't put you on the spot too much, other than I just know that we've both covered stories. We've probably all covered stories of the cherry industry is coming, the effects of the harsh winter. I mean, this is going to be a big issue in the months ahead, isn't it?
It is, and in fact, earlier this week there were some stories that 910 did specifically about the corn crop. There are some farmers out there who are a little nervous. You know, what has a harsh winter done? Am I going to be able to do anything with this corn, or is this just going to have to be feed? Can it even be feed? So a lot of them are really just impatiently kind of waiting for the snow to melt so they can go out and really inspect what they're working with. So I think that in general, the crops are going to be a big story in the next few weeks as the snow does start to melt, and we can get out there and see, I guess, what has really happened the last 4 or 5 months.
Yeah, we had a story this week of our own, a farmer we found, I think in Grawn, but they still had part of their corn crop on the ground from last year. So it's just going to be a mess.
Why didn't they
to
harvest?
Start? And I was trying to remember that too. I don't know if it was just the late season. I remember some issue with that last fall too. That
It was a slow growing season,
Yeah.
maybe, because it was cool, so the crop didn't get finished, and then it was too much rain. They couldn't get it in.
rain and snow and whatever came in early. So, yeah, like you said, that'll be one to follow up on. Marisa, a big story for Grand Traverse County in recent weeks, the shooting incident within the county. A man and woman involved in that, and you've been following that story. I just let you take it over from there.
Sure, yeah, it happened over the weekend, so our weekend reporter covered it first. But of course, whenever there's an active investigation, details are always limited, which can be, as frustrating as it is for the news media and the public, it's better to have little details that are accurate versus speculation and, you know, things swirling around that the police are saying that turns out maybe isn't true. So I credit the police department actually with kind of keeping it close to the vest a little bit, because then the details we are getting are true. And I think that typically journalists like to, have the truth out there versus anything else. Yep. So what we do know so far is that a man and woman were arguing in the woman's apartments or townhome. It looks like a newer townhome, I guess I'd call it. And she is married. Her husband wasn't home. The two were in a relationship. It's one of those things that's a little bit difficult to define, I guess. There were some kids in the home, and she claimed that when they started to argue, she asked him to leave, but what his family says, because we spoke to his family, is that she came and picked him up and drove him to her house. So he didn't have a ride home. So when she kicked him out, they argue that he went back inside to most likely inquire about a ride or what can he do, because he didn't have any sort of transportation. He didn't drive. And she had retrieved her gun from her gun safe and claimed that he walked up to her, they argued, and then the gun went off. So she never says, I shot him. She never said really any detail. It was more, oh, he came up to me and the gun went off. So I think that what the police are really trying to wrestle with is that you have really two witnesses, because the kids didn't witness anything and one of them is dead. So you have one person saying what happened who kind of has the upper hand. So the Michigan State Police reconstruction team is reconstructing the scene, and the police said that's really going to be helpful to them, and also an autopsy as well. So they're just kind of waiting right now.
And that could be a lengthy process, as we know.
Right. Especially since Michigan State Police, the reconstruction team out of Grayling, this isn't the only case they're working on. So they have a bunch of things they have to do as well. So the sheriff said it could likely be several weeks.
Well, what it was interesting about that case to me is, and again with the early details, we heard man and woman arguing. Man is in the woman's house. At the time, it was a question of whether he was invited or not invited.
Right.
And obviously there was an argument in her home. So that just kind of took it to a whole new level of just raising the questions.
Right. And of course,
But she's not claiming a self-defense?
Not yet, no. She has not
She hasn't
spoken.
been charged with
She's
anything.
not been charged with
No.
it.
Yeah.
Nope. She is free to go. She's free to do whatever she needs to do. Obviously, talk with her family. I do know that I think the police, they have certainly conducted interviews with neighbors, with his family, with her family, just to kind of figure out what kind of relationship did they have. Again, she says she went to his house to pick him up and bring her to her house. So I guess you can't really claim that he intruded in her home necessarily. If he was invited there, he was asked to leave, but she didn't lock the door. This is all what his mother had argued, is that if she was really frightened, if she was really scared, then she should have locked herself in her home and called the police. But she just left the door open and went and got her gun. So I think really there's just so many unanswered questions for his family, for the police. So it's probably going to turn into a bigger story than it is right now.
Yeah. Which just reminds me, and we don't have to go into detail, but the Bobby Caldwell,
that's what we all
Monica
thought
Anderson
as well.
Story from,
Right.
was it last fall, that
Yeah.
just wrapped up recently with his pleading guilty.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, it was the same kind of thing. You have two people who know what happened. There were kids at the home as well, and one of those people is dead. So you really only have one person's account to go off of. And again, the Traverse City Police reconstructed the scene. They were there. They questioned him on several occasions and said his story never changed. So there was no reason for them to believe that it was anything other than what happened or what he said happened. Mm-hmm. So it could very well turn out to be the same situation here. And for his family, they're just obviously very concerned and worried. So it's always, again, as a journalist, a little bit awkward to find yourself in those kinds of situations.
Yeah, but the big difference here, at least so far, is that he was charged with something and pled guilty.
With Bobby Caldwell?
Yeah,
yes.
with Bobby Caldwell.
Yes, so. And here, well, and they were able to pick him up on a warrant unrelated to the case, where I'm sure if he didn't have that warrant, it would have been the same thing here. He would just be free to go until they were able to charge him. Yeah. So.
All right, Peter, let's shift back over to you. We're going to completely change gears and talk about something entirely different.
Okay. What do you want to talk about?
I have no good segue for this,
yeah.
But zebra mussels.
Mm.
Tell us what IPR is doing with the zebra mussel story. There's a way to hopefully mitigate them to some extent.
So there was a piece in the New York Times in February about this scientist who had come up with he had discovered a bacterium that, when filtered out of the water by a zebra or a quagga mussel, kills it. And so he developed a product, a company called Marone Bioinnovations in California has developed a product that can be put in the water and it will kill, in most cases, more than 90% of the mussels that are in the target area. Now I heard that and I thought, well, maybe this will be like lampricide with lampreys, where 50 years ago we discovered this chemical to really push back, not exterminate, but push back sea lampreys to the point where they're not a significant problem in the Great Lakes. But I was quickly disabused of this idea, and in fact, this will have very limited uses. Right now, it's being made of use in water intake pipes. So, because one of the initial problems with zebra mussels was that in, say, like a power plant where they have to draw in water to cool it, zebra mussels would colonize the pipe and clog it up. And scuba divers actually died in some instances going into these pipes and clearing them. Right now they use chlorine to flush them out and kill all the mussels. So this is a new product. I think in 2012 they could start using it. And this year, maybe this spring, it'll be approved for use on open waters. So lake associations that have zebra mussels, lakes like Glen Lake, are looking at it to do some very limited things. But it wouldn't even be feasible to eradicate mussels from even a small inland lake, like even Little Glen. It just, you can't kill them. You can't kill enough of them quickly enough to prevent them from spreading beyond. But the use that they can make of it that I thought was kind of interesting, if you spend much time on inland lakes, I snorkel a lot in Crystal Lake, and what you'll see is all the native clams have all gone because the zebra mussels cluster around them and they basically smother the clams. Clams can't really filter, they can't reproduce, they can't move, they can't do any of the things they need to do, so they just die. So I used to dive down the drop off in Crystal Lake, and you'd see all these clams sticking out of the bottom, and now you see almost none. And there are a number of native, they're actually mussels, but we call them clams, that are being eradicated in the Great Lakes and Mississippi River Basin because of zebra mussels. So in Glen Lake, what they're talking about doing is using this. It's called Zequinox is the product, using Zequinox to kind of kill off zebra mussels in a few areas of the lake and create little sanctuaries for clams, so that at least in those places, clams could reproduce and thrive a little bit, and not, so they won't go extinct in the lake.
Is there would you know the financial implication of something like that?
They don't. I actually listened while a member of the Glen Lake Association spoke with the representative from Marone Bio Innovations on the phone, and he was not really willing to quote a price to them. And they don't know. They're just getting EPA approval to do this, so it's not clear what the price will be. But the product will be manufactured in Michigan. They'll make it down in southwest Michigan somewhere. They have a factory, and their plan is to expand that and produce the product there. So you'll be buying local.
Always a good thing.
Yeah.
Always a good thing. All right, we're going to take a break here on the briefing room. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit about feral pigs, and we will talk about a drug problem in Benzie County. All those still ahead right here on the briefing room. We'll be right back.
Continuing financial support for Up North TV comes from East Bay Charter Township, the City of Traverse City, Elmwood Charter Township, and the Charter Township of Garfield. Their support makes it possible for our communities to create and enjoy local programming. Help bring awareness, promote your cause, or share your craft. Get started at upnorthmedia.org.
Welcome back to the briefing room. I'm Bill Froehlich with Peter Payette from Interlochen Public Radio and Marisa McKay from 9 and 10 News. Marisa, let's turn over to you. We've been covering the ongoing drug problem in Benzie County for weeks, months really,
right,
if not longer than that even. Drug overdose deaths, heroin, a big problem the sheriff has talked about before, but again, you've kind of looked in depth into that recently.
Right, we're going to be preparing another in-depth piece that will air at the end of the month, and as we talked about before, it's during ratings periods where we have more of our resources and more time can be dedicated to stories, so we can really investigate. And we just interviewed the sheriff the other day for the story, and he said that since he's been here, there's been 6 overdose deaths, and he's been here for just a little over a year. So it's certainly a big problem and something that he is concerned about. He kind of cites perhaps the removal of a school resource officer or the DARE program. Once the federal dollars left, then a lot of these smaller communities don't have the funds or really the ability to pull somebody off the road and put them in the schools. But he said that the lack of dialogue between people, the lack of maybe awareness between the students and the police could contribute to this problem. He also said that what's unique about his county is that he claims that it's a very tight-knit drug culture in Benzie County where people look out for one another. So it's hard to prosecute, it's hard to arrest, it's hard to do anything to really kind of send a message to people if people are tight-knit and not really willing to get anyone in trouble. We're also going to interview a woman who, her brother died last year from a drug overdose and her cousin died on 2 Wednesdays ago, 2 weeks ago. So she is, after the first death, she was upset about it and was very instrumental in getting that Narcan drug into the sheriff's department because she told us and the sheriff she didn't want another family to go through this. And lo and behold, it's her family again dealing with this issue. So I think I don't think there's really an answer, and that's something the story is going to focus on, that there's really not one solution, but what can the community do to try to do something about it. So in addition to talking to this woman and the sheriff, we're going to speak to the county prosecutor, just kind of learn, once these cases make it to her, what is she going to do about it?
All right. That's a loaded question.
Yeah.
On a somewhat related note,
yes.
I mean, there's a connection here between that story and the idea to legalize marijuana in Benzie County. That issue came up this week.
Right.
With county government?
Yep, it was a county government. We know that other cities in the state of Michigan, such as Grand Rapids and Ann Arbor, have made the possession of some amounts of marijuana, small amounts of marijuana, a civil infraction. Some people, I guess, would use the term legalize, but that's technically what they would do. And
Still illegal, but
yep.
The most minor penalty. Yeah.
Right,
Okay.
and specifically it would protect the 2.5 ounces of the medical marijuana that you're allowed to carry. So the gentleman who's kind of behind this movement is from the Benzie Normal chapter, which is the national organization to reform marijuana laws. and he is really working towards getting this on the November ballot. So the last few weeks we were following the story. Was it going to be something the Board of Commissioners would undertake and enact an ordinance, as they can sometimes do? They actually came back with a legal opinion, and this legal opinion had told them that in fact would not be legal for them to enact an ordinance that would go against the state law as a whole. They could receive some sort of Michigan Department of Community Health infractions for doing something like that. Again, that's still cloudy because it's just one legal opinion. But as after that meeting, that discussion, both groups kind of came to the conclusion that if this gentleman from the Normal chapter, whose name is Reverend Stephen Thompson, if he could get enough signatures and get a legal opinion backing that the state of Michigan or that Benzie County could do this, he could put it on the November ballot and give it to the people. And so that's kind of what the chairman of the board said he felt was the best move, and the Reverend agreed.
And the connection here to heroin, I mean, this was part of the presentation the other day in terms of the connection between that and more severe drugs.
Right. Reverend Thompson was arguing that, he acknowledges there's a very substantial drug problem in Benzie County, and he says it really is these opiates, the prescription pills, the heroin, the meth, and he's arguing that, if we can do this with the marijuana use in the county, then people might turn to that instead of these other drugs, and then the police would have more ability and more manpower to chase after the harder drug problems versus dealing with things that would then be a civil infraction and not at the top of their priority list necessarily. The sheriff did say that he viewed marijuana as well as alcohol as a gateway drug at times because, if your inhibitions are lowered, then maybe you would want to try something else. But he too agreed that, he's all for it going to the people, and he would not stand in the way of something like that going on the November ballot.
Why is there a legal question if Ann Arbor has, and I think Traverse City had made a similar amendment before the medical marijuana was approved?
It is because that's a municipality. It's a smaller municipality, so townships and cities don't have the same sanctions as a county would face, and so that's that's a legal opinion anyway of the County Board of Commissioners that they sought. But there were some in the audience, some attorneys and other, I guess, legal individuals in there who argue that there in fact was case law to support what the Reverend was doing. So I think it's going to become a matter of legal opinions and maybe some legal jargon that might go over my head, but I'll have to do some more investigating about it.
That was kind of my last question on that. Was there a public opinion? Was there public comment at the meeting?
There wasn't public comment that we saw. There may have been at the very end of the meeting, but that was several hours after. And as we know, news is always on a deadline, so sometimes you can't stay for all of that stuff.
Okay.
The marijuana advocates really skew comment. We've noticed on our website, if there's a medical marijuana story, it gets so much traffic.
It does.
And they just pile on the comments.
The most Twitter activity that I've ever seen was because my name was attached to the story. So
So that public sentiment on that topic would be very hard, short of a vote, to really get a sense of, because most people just don't care.
Yeah.
And the people that show up are people who passionately
do care. Yeah. Oh, that's a good point too.
I would say for public comment, the only thing was that some people brought up the case law that would support what the Reverend was doing.
Gotcha. Well, let's close out with one more topic this week. Peter, we'll go back to you. This is a story on the definition of wild pigs. Russian boar, Eurasian, I mean, what curly tails, straight tails, the problems with the DNR. We know just a few weeks ago we had Mark Baker with Baker's Green Acres kind of won his issue, but then again, most recently the
he didn't actually win. He got rid of his Russian boar, and then the DNR used that as a way to get out. They said, well, the Russian boar is not on the property anymore, so there's nothing.
So they threw out the suit.
So and Mark wanted to keep fighting, but the judge dismissed there were actually two cases because there were cross lawsuits. But so in that instance, no judge, there was no opinion was given about the merits of either side of that case. The ruling that did come out was out of Marquette. Up in Marquette, there were two operations. One is really a hunting ranch. The other, my understanding, is a kind of a farm, and the owners breed these Eurasian type boars for that ranch, and they also sell some for meat, for food. Okay. And in that case, the judge basically gave the ranchers and the farmers everything they could want. The people that raise these pigs have characterized the DNR's position as, we'll know them when we see them, because the state has put forward this list of characteristics and said, if your pig meets even one of these characteristics, it might be a banned species. It doesn't, and the state has acknowledged that a pig could meet one of the characteristics and not be a banned species. And so the judge didn't use the phrase, we'll know them when we see them, but to my read, in legal terms, he basically said that. He basically said this is arbitrary. There's no way for one of these ranchers to know whether he or she is in violation, and there's potential felony penalties. So this is an unconstitutional law.
So where does it go from here? Is the DNR going to give up? I mean, we talked with a couple of lawmakers who said they don't support the DNR pursuing this anymore in terms of spending state dollars fighting it.
They never have. I think the state's in a tough spot. I don't know. I would think they would appeal it, but I don't know that they'll be more successful on appeal. The judge's opinion was pretty unequivocal. So we'll see what an appellate panel says. But clearly, and the judge even acknowledged, a wild pig population is a serious problem for the landscape of Michigan. It is not something that you want to develop. But he's saying this rule is just arbitrary. It's not fair. You can't address it this way. So I'm not really sure what the state's move is.
Well, I just wonder if it's easier to come back with a different set of guidelines that is more specific than it is to go back and fight the battle that they've been trying to fight for years.
But the problem is that pigs have been bred and crossbred and interbred over so many generations that these characteristics are mingled in a way that is difficult to separate. The farmer's position is that all pigs are one species, and most of the experts. Now, I didn't read the affidavits, but looking at the judge's opinion, he quoted from multiple experts that the state brought and that the state relies on, who all said, scientifically, I think one quote was that it flies in the face of scientific taxonomy to try and separate domestic pigs from wild pigs as a separate species, because there's been so much interbreeding among the different pig populations over centuries.
If nothing else, the DNR needs different experts.
Yeah, perhaps. I don't know.
I say that in jest. But
yeah, I don't know how you sort it out.
Well, I'm sure that there will be more, and you guys will be on top of it. Thanks, Peter.
Yeah.
Peter Payette from Interlochen Public Radio and Marisa McKay from 9 and 10 News. Thank you for coming in. And thanks, everyone, for tuning into the Briefing Room this week. I'm Bill Froehlich from WTCM, and we'll see you again next time right here on the Briefing Room.